So it's time for another experiment. I'm going to pit my Aerogarden Sprout up against the Click&Grow Smart Garden, and we will see who can grow the best orange hat tomatoes, and we will also try some Baby's Butterhead lettuce. The systems are about the same size, so it seemed like a pretty even face-off, at least in that regard, but there are quite a few differences between the two, so I really want to see how they're going to do in a head-to-head. Let's jump right into kind of going over high level the differences between the two, and then we will get these guys planted up and see how this goes. So they can both grow three things. Now, they have 3 holes. I would never recommend that you grow 3. I mean, unless it's something very tiny. So for this experiment, I am just going to be using the back hole and the front hole. Going to be growing the orange hat tomato that I love and these mini butterhead lettuce. So the lettuce is going to go in the front, the tomatoes are going to go in the back. So the main difference, while they both have spaces to grow 3 plants, the holes are smaller on the Aerogarden, whereas the holes on the Click&Grow are much bigger. So on the Aerogarden, you're going to use these baskets, and then you can put the sponges in. I'm using the Grow Anything. These are the ones that I use pretty much for everything because I like to use my own seeds. So they come just with the pellet, and then that is going to nestle into the basket, and then you're going to put a sticker on top after you've put your seed in. Whereas for the Click&Grow, they have these completely contained. So while the basket you can see the pellet inside, it's got lots of space for the roots to get out. The idea with the Click&Grow is that they're pretty much contained in here. There's the wick that's going to pull up the water from the reservoir, and sometimes I'm assuming the roots could get through here, but it doesn't have the expansion for the roots that the Aerogarden allows. I can get the lid off because I am going to be using my own seeds. I picked up these experimental pods, which is going to let me put my own seeds in if I can get into the container. And you have all pods there. Now, this is a great time to talk about one of the biggest differences and one of the things I'm most interested to see in terms of growing. The Aerogarden unit, you are just putting in these little inert pods, and you are going to use, these are the Aerogarden nutrients. You can use whatever nutrients you want. The Click&Grow pods are all you get. It says they have nutrients in them. You can see little flecks. I don't know if that is said nutrients, but that's it. All you're adding with the Click&Grow is just water. You don't have to mess around adding nutrients every 2 weeks. You don't do anything, which I'm thinking could either be a really good thing for somebody that wants nothing to fuss with, but it could be a bad thing. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to grow the tomatoes, because these could be in there for months. And I really want to see, can the Click&Grow sustain them and sustain them through the fruit development? Because there's nothing being added. I'm really curious to see how long one of these little pods in the Click&Grow is going to support a fruiting plant that is not going to be harvested very quickly. So I'm actually going to need 2 of these. As the experiment goes, I'm going to be giving updates so that you guys can see what is changing. So they also, Click&Grow does have the little clear domes that are going to go on top. We are just going to leave those on until we see the seeds germinating. Basically, they are just there to increase the humidity and help with germination. After the plants have germinated, we want to get them off. We don't want the leaves touching because it can lead to burning of the leaves. As I'm just using 2 of the holes and not 3, I will call out that neither of the systems comes with anything to cover the extra hole. And you're definitely going to want to cover that hole because anytime we have water, light, and nutrients, you run the risk of developing algae, and we have all 3 in a hydroponic environment, which means you're going to want to cover up any of the holes you're not using in order to try and limit the amount of light that is getting into that nutrient solution. While the Click&Grow doesn't have the nutrients in the water, because the nutrients are in the grow pod, they're still there in that calculation because otherwise our plants wouldn't grow. For the Aerogarden, I'm going to use this little Aerogarden cover. I'll put the link in the description below if you want to check them out, but you definitely don't have to use these. You can use anything that's going to cover up the hole. A lot of people use golf balls if you have a bunch of those kicking around, but anything that's going to cover the hole will work. So that is going to go in the center one. Now for the Click&Grow, I haven't seen anything they have to cover the hole. One thing I did find is I had this little clay base for a pot, and it seems to fit perfectly over the hole. So that is what I am going to use to cover that one. Now that we have those set up, so I have these new Aerogarden stickers that you need with the Grow Anything pods. Honestly, I don't love them. I like the old ones that kind of you had to iron on. They were more of a pain to put them on, but they just seem to stay on better than the sticker ones. I always like to plant 2 per whenever I am growing any peppers or anything like that, and then I'm going to thin it down to 1 once I see which plant is the strongest. I'm just going to push that up so the pot is there, and then very carefully drop the 2 seeds in, let it fall down, and you're going to want them to be at the bottom. A lot of times I pre-soak these, but honestly I forgot, guys, so I didn't do that this time. I'm gonna pop it in there and push it down so it clicks down. You need to get the sticker on top. The micro hat tomatoes are a very short tomato. They only grow a few inches tall, which makes them perfect for growing in the Aerogarden Sprout or the smaller Click and Grow. So I'm going to take my pod and whoops, I'm going to take the top off as well. Pop that in there. Now the thing you can do is if you have a washable marker, you can write what is growing on the back here so you can keep track of it. And then we are just going to pop it into the back, and then it just sits right down in there. That's a nice thing with these. They have these reusable covers to keep the light out. Grab 2 seeds and I'm just going to pop that in the hole. It's easier to see in the holes of the Click and Grow one because the pods are so much bigger, which I like. The shape of them is very much like the Rise pods, but these are even bigger than the Rise Garden ones. And I'm going to take my little dome and put that on top. Found the little Aerogarden domes. So that is going to go on this one. I find actually with the stickers, these just sit on. If you have the older ones where they were the iron-on, you have to push them down a little bit because, like I said, those were thicker. So that is our tomato done. Next, we need to get in the lettuce. I'm still going to do 2 of the lettuce seeds, and I'm going to thin to 1. These ones are from Renee's Garden. I will put the link down below. I love both of these companies. Baker Creek is one I have used for many, many years. Renee's Garden is newer to me, but quite a few dwarf varieties, and they also have a lot of container varieties. I'm gonna get hybrids from Renee's Garden, whereas you don't get that from the Baker Creek, which is fine. I am not saying that hybrids are bad, but it just depends if you only wanna grow heirlooms. So I put my 2 seeds in for the lettuce, and now I need to do the Aerogarden one. I really love these Grow Anything pods. They just let you grow whatever you want. It allows for a lot more flexibility, and then you can just expand the amount of things you can grow. Guys, there are so many dwarf varieties of plants that you can grow even in these small systems. I will put a link up above. You can totally use the pre-seeded pods if you want, but if you're feeling like you want to try something new, you have that option. We'll pop it in there. We have tomato in the back, lettuce in the front in both systems. One thing I will say is on the Sprout, you want to raise the light pretty easy. You just pull it up. To start, you're always going to want it at the lowest position. On the Click and Grow, to raise the height, see if I can do this without dropping it. It's easier to take off than I'm making it look, but doing it with one hand, it's a little tricky. So you pull this off, you take one of these extensions, you slide it in. There's actually a groove on the back where you can feed the wire into, and then you're going to attach that back onto the unit. So a bit more manual, a bit more fiddly. You want to make sure you keep track of these so you don't lose them, but it's just a difference in the units. I'm going to get these guys on the shelf behind me, and then we will fill them up, and then the timer starts. That's one thing I should mention. The Click and Grow has no pump. The Aerogarden Sprout does have a pump. So we are good there, filled up to the line. So this is the float on this one. Not saying this is the best way to fill it up. The float will rise when there's enough water. The light on the Click and Grow in its down lowest position is much lower than the Aerogarden Sprout. So I almost forgot, I need to put the nutrients into the Aerogarden. So I'm going to grab my Aerogarden nutrients, shake it up really, really well. And then I like to use a syringe to get out the nutrients. And for the Sprout, we are going to need 4 mils. So I'm going to take this, get it into the unit, and then we will let these guys do their growing thing and check back in them in about a week or so. So it has been 9 days and we have some growth. So this is the point, actually probably a little bit after, where you want to remove the dome. So I'm just going to take that off and the back one, and it looks like we've got some good growth. And the reason you want to take it off is there's this condensation forming on there, and you can even see it on the leaves there. And if that touches, it can actually lead to burning of the leaves. So we want to make sure that comes off. Now over on the Click and Grow side, same thing. That guy is ready to come off. So strangely enough for the lettuce here, these ones did not germinate. I then put in 2 more, and they still haven't germinated. So I have no idea what's going on with this pod, but I'm going to leave it. It's got 2 sets of the exact same seeds that went into the Aerogarden. So we are just going to leave it to see what it is doing. Now, the other thing that is interesting, if I can change here, you can see the difference in light height. You want to keep the light about 4 to 6 inches above the top of the plant. Now on the Click and Grow side, that is less, well, 3 inches. So it's less than the 4 inches we want ideally. Now my only option to raise the light is to use one of these guys, and that's going to bump it another 4 inches. So you don't get those increments that you get with the Aerogarden. Don't know how much difference that's going to make in the long term. So I'm going to go ahead and raise this light up. I'm going to put the camera down for a second because I don't have enough hands. 8 1/4 inches. So now we're higher than we are on the Aerogarden Sprout. So there you can see the difference in height, and those are my only options. So we will see how this happens. Ideally, I probably should have had something in between them to stop the light leakage, but as we all know, this is far from a true scientific experiment. We're just trying things out and we'll see what results we get. So just wanted to point this out. I called out in an earlier update about how I had some water and how it could burn. So you can see what's happened to the little cotyledon here. That is where the water droplet was, and it was touching onto the dome. So that's exactly why you don't want to let that happen. All right, it's time for an update. We are at 3.5 weeks. It is time to put some nutrients in them. I'm a couple days late on that, if I'm being honest. So there is definitely some difference in the growth. Everything on the Aerogarden side is bigger, even though I am late on adding the nutrients because that has been blinking for a day or two. The one thing I did notice, the leaves seem a bit darker on the Click&Grow side, but they're way smaller. And finally, this guy decided to show up. Very late, but it's one of those examples where sometimes it's just worth waiting and seeing what happens. There is nothing to do on the Click&Grow side. I did top up the water already. For the Aerogarden side, I'm just going to go ahead, shake up my nutrients, and then going to grab a free hand and I'm going to put those in. We are good for another 2 weeks and we'll check back. So it's been a little bit. It is now April 1st. The whole month of March was a bit of a mess. So I do not have any footage of the experiment for the months of March. So we are picking this up again. I kept them alive. That was about all I managed to do during that time. Definitely have some observations, which I will point out when I flip the camera. And we will keep this going for another 2 weeks because I believe I started this on about January 15th and we will end it on April 15th. And there is a lot going on. So now that you guys are up to date on why there's going to be a huge jump from a few seconds ago when you saw the plants to now, I will show you what is going on. And I'll just kind of let you guys know what I've noticed in this past month. And then I will give you my final thoughts in 2 weeks. Things are growing. There are some things to point out. There is some issues here. I'm not going to lie, that light has been blinking. I don't like where I put these because I don't notice it because it's too close to the tops. Had a little bit less food, so I have to call that out because this guy came with all the food that it was going to have, and this guy I have definitely, I don't know how long that light's been blinking. The lettuce here, it's way past its prime, so don't get on me for that. I was kind of just letting them do their things. This one, it's funny, this one has a different shape. They are both the same seed. This one had a beautiful head that I could have harvested, but I was kind of just waiting to see if this one would catch up, and then by the time this one caught up, this one was looking like that. This one was more open, the head, that I noticed. This one was more tight, kind of what the little gem is supposed to be, but both of them worked out okay. Eventually, once this one got going, after the very, very, very long time and having to reseed it, it did okay. Not gonna lie, it did okay. But if we look on the tomato, I feel like you see more of the issues over there. There's a lot of yellowing on the leaves, some other stuff going on. It did make a bunch of flowers, but honestly, it has not, that I can see, actually managed to produce a single fruit. Now, this one over here, who has also suffered from a certain amount of neglect, and the leaves are not looking perfect there, but honestly, I think that's more a matter that the light needs to be raised as high as the light goes. But it is too close to the light. These guys tend to be shorter usually, but I should have pruned that and I didn't. But it is covered in tomatoes. We even have one ripening there and it's still got some more flowers on it. Not sure how many of those will set. There's tomatoes everywhere on this one, even with me forgetting to put the nutrients in. Neither is looking perfect. I will be the first to admit that. That's where we're at now. A far cry from where we were at the end of February with those tiny plants. March was definitely a month of growth for these guys. So as of today, it has been exactly 3 months since I started that experiment behind me to compare the Click&Grow 3-pod with my new Aerogarden Sprout to see what is the difference between the two. Is one actually better than the other? And I have some definite feelings on which one I think the winner is. But I just want to share my observations with you guys, and then you can decide if you're trying to figure out which one of the two you want, which is best for you. Because it's really not a matter of right versus wrong or better versus worse. There's just differences. And some of the things that might be a negative for one person are actually a positive for another. I have my personal winner that I think for me, if I was choosing one. So I'm going to flip the camera. And then let's see what's going on back there. So this is what the 3 months of growing looks like. There's been a little bit of neglect on my part, so I will call that out. In the Click&Grow, we did eventually get a lettuce. It formed differently, I would say. Like it kind of the leaves were branching, folding out from a central point, where this one looks like that now, but originally when it was growing up, it made a perfect little gem head on it, and this one was so far ahead. It came up almost straight away. It grew amazing. I kind of just left it, so I haven't really been harvesting, so that's why it's looking a little overgrown, but I just wanted to see where they would be at the end of 3 months. On the other hand, on the Click and Grow one, if you guys remember, I had to go and reseed it with new seeds because the first ones didn't even germinate, which for lettuce, like, I just haven't had that experience before. And I put the same amount of seeds in both from the same packet, and then I had to put an extra 2 in here. So this one was already a bit behind just because this one had already taken off and was growing well. We look at the tomato though. There's definitely some crispiness and not looking particularly healthy. Obviously, I haven't put anything in it because their pods are supposed to have everything that you need. It made lots of little flowers. There's still some flowers up there. It's grown tall and spindly and lots of flowers. Like, it always had lots of flowers, but, and I said in the other update that it had no tomatoes. I missed these guys at the top. So it has 3. My apologies. If we go over to the Aerogarden, there are loads of tomatoes. They're all in here. I'm actually going to be harvesting a bunch of them. So all the ones down there, there's more up top. I'll harvest them in a second to see what there is. Now, there's some crunchiness over here too, so it's not like this one's absolutely perfect. I will say I did forget multiple times to put in the liquid plant food on schedule, so it wasn't getting as many nutrients as it should. But even with that neglect, it's done way better than the Click and Grow, which is supposed to have everything that it needs. And this light is at the highest height that it can go. The Click and Grow one can go higher, but I would need to put in the extra insert, which would take it higher than the space that I have, so I would need to move it. The water gauge, so obviously I love that you can see the water gauge there. On the Click and Grow, the water gauge, the only thing you can see is it's right here. If it's at the top, then it's full. If not, it's needs water, like it sinks down. It's literally just, it's got an air pocket in it and it floats on the water. The annoying thing that I found is, especially with the lettuce, I can't see it. There were times where that was down pretty low and I just didn't know. Whereas on the Aerogarden, I can see it, but also sometimes a tip on the Aerogarden to remind me to add water in is it has the pump. But when the water gets low, the pump lets you know. So I'd hear it and be like, oh God, I got to put water in. In the Click and Grow, and this totally surprised me. I obviously did not do enough research before I bought it, but there is no pump. You are literally just putting water into this reservoir and the water just sits there. They have wicks where it wicks it up. It pulls the water in. The little pods are in here. And as I showed you guys at the beginning of the pods, the roots can only grow in here. Get into the Aerogarden side for a second. So you look at all the roots that are in there, and if you think on this side they've only got a little cup for their roots. I don't even know if I can get in there. I don't know if you can see in there. I'll try and zoom in on the edit, but there are some little tiny roots I can kind of see coming down the wick, but that's it. I'm assuming these guys are pretty root bound in there. Maybe not as bad for something like a lettuce. For something like a tomato or a pepper that's going to be there for a long time, I just think you want those roots to be able to spread out. So that is my harvest off of my little Aerogarden Sprout. It's about 13 little tomatoes there, so not bad. Good little harvest. So given all of that, my feeling is, if I had to buy one of the two, I would buy the Aerogarden. I like the fact that I can put in the nutrients, I can put in what I want. I mean, in theory, you could put nutrients into the Click and Grow as well, just pour them into the bottom. I like the fact that it has a pump to circulate the water, like the flashing light. I mean, sometimes I missed it because of where the shelf is, but if you had it just on the countertop, it would be much easier to see. I like the fact that the light is attached and can click up in multiple like micro increments. Now, it doesn't go as high as the Click and Grow will, but with the Click and Grow, you're going at like 4 or 5 inch segments where you just put in a new piece, then you have to take it off and put in a new piece. So if you lose these, you're in a pickle. Like that light's not going up any higher unless you can MacGyver it some way. So I don't like that because it can get lost. I don't like the fact that the roots, like all they have to grow in is this. It's not very big, like compared to my hand. It's not very big at all. And that's all they have. If the roots do make it down the wick, but even in there, like there's foam in there. They're not meant to go down there. So if you look back at how big those roots were when I showed you for the lettuce and the tomatoes, that's like going to be so root bound in here. On the flip side, However, if you don't want to worry about pumps and like the fact that the sound of the pump was tipping me off to add water into the Aerogarden, you leave that too long and you're going to burn out your pump. That could be a negative. So if you don't want to fiddle around with pumps, if you're just kind of getting started and you just want to know that for the most part everything they say is in the pods that go in here to give it all the nutrients, then this is less fuss. So for somebody getting started, maybe they would prefer that. So I'm not saying that the Click&Grow is bad. Just for me, I would choose the Aerogarden Sprout. I just like it better. That's just me. Maybe I'm an Aerogarden snob, I don't know. And a lot of people predicted that the Aerogarden would win, and like I said, in my opinion, it did. And if you're contemplating an Aerogarden and not sure which one you might want to get, Aerogarden Sprout is the smallest. You can still grow an awful lot in it. There are so many Aerogardens you can get. So I did a whole comparison of all the Aerogardens, listing all their features, and came up with a whole comparison chart. I will list it down below so you guys can go check it out and kind of compare all the models and find out what's best for you. So if you only have a small space, then maybe the small Aerogarden Sprout would be best for you. And there's an awful lot you can grow in it. You can check out this video over here about 14 different things you can grow in an Aerogarden Sprout.